Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Good morning and welcome to the 2024 Council of the Americas Symposium. Once again, it is an honor to unite exceptional business leaders from across sectors and geographies, each actively involved in shaping Latin America's future and transforming the region into a powerhouse of global leadership. For 29 years, it's hard to believe, 29 years, this symposium has provided an invaluable platform where business visionaries come together to collectively reflect on the trends and challenges of our hemisphere, identifying common ground between industries, policies, and regional visions. Today's sessions reflect the convergence of new opportunities for Latin America. We're strengthening the region's voice and leadership on the global stage by welcoming thought leaders and visionaries who are at the forefront of the region's business landscape, from across industries to come together as peers. These types of cross-border discussions aimed at aligning our region's latest trends are more crucial than ever, as we find ourselves just days away from the US elections. 2024 is already known as the most critical year in global history, with half of the planet's population casting a ballot. The outcome of the US elections will join a series of other electoral challenges our region has experienced in the last year, including 6 Latin American countries that voted for their next president. Economically, Latin America has experienced moderate growth this year. Yet, as the world faces escalating tensions in places like Ukraine and the Middle East, Latin America distance and relative geopolitical neutrality is beginning to attract increasing international investment. This advantage in geographical positioning is further emphasized in Latin America's major role in leading sustainable solutions for climate change. Home to 40% of the critical minerals and resources needed for renewable energy, there is no such thing as a greener planet without Latin America. This year, Latin America stands at the forefront of the intersection between climate and politics. The region is set to host several pivotal events, including the United Nations COP16 in Colombia, the G20 Summit in Brazil, and APEC in Peru. This moment will carry into 2025, when the Brazilian Amazon, home to 20% of the world's oxygen, will host the iconic COP30. These developments signal a new era of opportunities for Latin America, reinforcing its role as a significant global player. Today acts as the nexus of Latin American potential, and that is why we are honored to welcome over 500 regional business leaders to this year's symposium, including pioneering companies born and bred in Latin America, who now occupy a crucial role on the global stage for their business leadership, innovation, digital transportation, transformation, and sustainability initiatives. The dialogue we engage in today will undoubtedly pave the way for sustainable progress across our industries. We hope to equip leaders with insights to navigate economic and political shifts while aligning strategies with key trends that support the positive growth of our region and the world. And tonight, we come together at the 29th Bravo Business Awards to celebrate the contributions and commitments of our Bravo honorees, visionary leaders from PepsiCo, Globant, Riverwood Capital, and Inter & Co. But before we begin, I would like to extend a heartfelt thank you to our 2024 sponsors and partners, and it is a very long list: the Inter-American Development Bank, the AES Corporation, Amazon Web Services, Chubb, Inter & Co., LLYC, Atlas Renewable Energy, Bank of America, Grupo Promedica, Moody's, Salesforce, SAP, BlackRock, FedEx, as well as our media partners, Americas Quarterly, Bloomberg Línea, CNN en Español, and El País. And I can tell you that none of this would be possible without the endless passion, commitment, and hard work of our Council of the Americas team in Miami. They are an amazing, as I like to say, very young group of professionals: Cindy, Luciana, Lorraine, Andres, Natalia, Fabiana, and Sofia. I want a special applause for them. Thank you guys. We're almost there. We just have to get through tonight. Now let us welcome to the stage really an amazing panel. The first panel of the day, Unleashing Latin America's Potential on the Global Stage, featuring Paula Santilli, CEO of PepsiCo for Latin America, Roberto Alvo, CEO of LATAM Airlines, Cristina Palmaka, President of SAP Latin America, the Caribbean, Ariane Ortiz-Bollin, Vice President, Senior Credit Officer for Latin America Credit Strategy and Research at Moody's Ratings, and the panel will be moderated by our good friend, Michael Stott, Latin America Editor for the Financial Times. So welcome, everybody. Enjoy today. Thank you.
Well, good morning, everybody. Many thanks to Maria Lourdes for that introduction, and special thanks to the Americas Society Council of the Americas for organizing this event and for inviting me to moderate. I think the ASCOA has an extraordinary convening power, as is evidenced by the quality of the attendees here today. And I think we're going to have a very interesting discussion to open the event. We're all excited about the potential of Latin America on the global stage. The opportunities are clearer than ever. We've heard them many, many times: nearshoring, critical minerals, renewable energy, food exports, among others. As Maria Lourdes mentioned, in a very troubled world, Latin America has some less obvious advantages: a region at peace, the developing world's most democratic region, a region with tremendous soft power. No one ever talks about Latin America's soft power: culture, food, music. It's appreciated around the world. The region maybe could make more of it in business terms. It's a region people want to live in. The digital nomads in the pandemic had a choice. They could have gone anywhere in the world. Many of them came to Latin American cities. Why? Because they're among the best to live in, and they had great connectivity and a great lifestyle. Those things are worth something in a world which is more and more troubled. I'm British. I live in the UK. We're a country at war. We've got a war going on in Europe, less than 2,000 miles from London, which is becoming more and more serious all the time. Latin America doesn't have those problems. So there's other things there I think we should always be aware of. But of course, it's a region that has, if we're honest, missed opportunities before. It's not grown the way it should have grown in the past 20 years. There's the hope now that it can grow more quickly and prosper. So we want to think a little bit in this panel today: how can the region make the most of the opportunities that it has before it? We've got a great panel to help us think about that. And I'm going to start with Cristina Palmaka from SAP to talk about another opportunity: AI. AI. What specific opportunities do you see for AI to enable companies in Latin America to take advantage of the extraordinary opportunities the region is facing?
Yeah, thank you so much. Well, good morning, my fellow panelists here. Always an honor to be here on this symposium, because I think we really start discussing real problems, right? Real opportunities also for the region, and especially on the field of technology. I am very pragmatic but very optimistic about the opportunities for the region. We are not recognized as the top technology region when you compare to other areas, like you talk about India and some of the development countries. But there is a lot of potential. There are a lot of things in the field of technology, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about AI, that is already taking place in the region, right? When you see about the number of startups that we have across the region, we have more than 30,000, 40 unicorns, most of them bringing innovation, bringing new ways of delivering things to ourselves, incorporating technology, AI, Gen AI, and many topics that sometimes we don't even know that we are using and consuming. So I think there is this potential and this opportunity for this creativity that we have across the region to materialize this in real business and really expand. When I talk about specifically about AI, I'll probably divide in two things. First, on the opportunities on how do we bring more productivity, more innovation, and also addressing new markets across the world using AI incorporated on our companies across the region. And I'm blessed because I see many examples on day-to-day across the region. We see companies that are kind of startups like the Notco in Chile. We have here, probably Roberto knows a lot about Notco. It's a plant-based food company that developed a couple of years ago, it's not new, an algorithm that is called Giuseppe that runs a combination of foods and also how to bring a better quality and also alternatives for their portfolio to be more productive and also more innovative. So those kind of things already are part of the reality. We also see many partners and some of our customers that bring with a eye of sustainability. So we are just closing a partnership with Ambipar. There is a company in Brazil that looks about the carbon footprint impacts and using technology to help companies to trace the carbon footprint, also to impact for a net zero approach. So in a creative way, is a company very robust that applies solutions for other companies to be more sustainable using technology, using AI, so incorporating this on the business-to-business alternative. So there are endless opportunities that we can bring, but probably two things that we should always pay attention on this field is first, education. How do we bring capabilities for these new solutions and also new opportunities for work to our society, for our community? Latin America is usually behind in terms of all the educational partners. So how do we accelerate and bring capabilities for these new jobs that will appear so we guarantee we have enough manpower for that? And also not forgetting the ethical part of AI, which goes hand in hand, not just on the cybersecurity, but especially probably the field that I am very focused and concerned on bias. Yeah, today, most of our big developments are happening in big developed countries. There may be without the representation of our minorities that we see across the region. So how do we incorporate this, that you don't develop things that are just based on a small community of people, but you include more people. So on those two verticals, I'll see as a big opportunity, but maybe also the risk or point of attention that we should be doing. But for sure, this will open and unleash a lot of opportunities, Michael, for the region. That's my view.
Thank you, Cristina. I'd like to turn now to Roberto Alvo, the CEO of LATAM Airlines at the end. I mean, running an airline, the biggest airline in the region, you've got a tremendous kind of overview at the same time of the business climate, haven't you, Roberto? I mean, what does the demand for air travel in the region tell us about the business environment, about the resilience of the region, and about where business opportunities are emerging, where the new hotspots are? Can you give us a little bit of the intelligence that you pick up from running LATAM?
Yes, well, thank you very much, and good morning to everyone. Well, you know that this industry was one of the most hit with the pandemic. We actually pretty much stopped from 100 to 0 in 3 weeks. And honestly, between 2019 and 2024, nobody knew exactly where we were going to come back. 50%, 80%, 100% of demand. I think that surprisingly for most of us, actually, we came back even stronger. If you draw a line today between 2019 and 24, in the region, traffic grew by 8%, so 2% a year. Given this whole thing that happened in between, I think it's amazing. And one of the things that many of us thought is that Zoom video conferences was going to take away most of the traveling, and actually did not. And something different happened. Some people started looking at travel as an alternative to do things that they wouldn't be able to do otherwise. So I've had people coming to Chile, which is far away, saying, listen, I'm here because of Zoom, because I didn't have 1 day for you. I had half a day for you. So I come here, I have 3 or 4 meetings, and then I can have lunch with you and have a discussion. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. So it's very interesting to think about how sometimes technology, we think that the first impact is going in one direction, and all of a sudden it's going actually in the opposite. The region is in a, I would say, frustrating stage, in my opinion. I think that we aren't growing with the potential we could. I think that we all understand political and social situations that make our economies and our countries not move necessarily the way we should. I remember conversations in the 90s in Chile where the whole discussion was, are we going to grow 6 or 7%? And it depends if the central bank wanted to keep the rates a little bit higher or not for 1 percentage point of inflation, between 3 and 4%. And here we are today battling for 2% growth. But you know, the potential of the region is amazing. We have 650 million people living in Latin America. That's twice the population of the US. The human resources are endless in that sense. And I think that we have a great opportunity to put ourselves to the task of what technology and the change is bringing. So I'm a big believer, despite of the ups and downs that we have in the region.
Thanks, Roberto. Paula, I'd like to turn to you now. Fostering inclusive growth is a big priority for Latin America. What can we learn from Pepsi's experience in contributing to the well-being of communities where it operates?
Yeah, so let me put it like this, Scott. It's 5 a.m. in any city in Latin America, 5 a.m. You wake up, you open your faucet to wash your face, there's no water, okay? Sometimes, somehow you manage, and you're off to your job around 5:30, worried about your kids that will go to school in a perhaps unsafe neighborhood, okay? You're stuck in traffic in the bus for a number of hours, right? And you finally make it to your job. So el ciudadano de a pie, la ciudadana de a pie, the citizen in Latin America deserves a better chance in life. They deserve to have running water. They deserve to have proper transportation, proper education, and certainly, and this is where all of us come in, they deserve better jobs and they deserve a better chance. No? So what we do in PepsiCo is we're a huge employer in Latin America. We create over 80,000 direct jobs. If we count our bottlers, it's double that number. It's close to 200,000 direct jobs and over 1.5 million, maybe even more, indirect jobs. So when we come and all of us together, this is our role. We need to give people in Latin America a chance of prosperity. That's what we're here for. When we come into any community, we create education, training, development, career opportunities like no other source of business. We create steadiness, stableness in jobs like no other business. No? We create education and development of what is coming into the future, like Cristina described, like no other company. That's our purpose. No? So we have all these strings attached to our fingers as business people, and we decide, do we want to bring people up with us or not? And we definitely, at least we in PepsiCo, are there for that purpose. Whether it's agro, to commerce, to manufacturing, to supply chain, we create better jobs so that people have a chance. And by the way, when we create better jobs and better prosperity, we are peace creators. No? You talked about war earlier, and we're all about peace, right? All of us, we want peace. So thank you, Council of the Americas, for everything you do in creating prosperity for the people of Latin America. Thank you, all of you, men and women in business. That is our job, to create peace in Latin America by creating better business.
Thank you, Paula. And I think we'll come back to some of those points on services and education in the discussion. Ariane, I wanted to turn to you now. Hanging over all of this, of course, is next Tuesday, the US election. What implications do you see for Latin America in the event of a Trump win or a Harris win? How's it going to affect the region?
Thank you, Michael, for the question, and it's really a pleasure for me to be here with all of you today. I'll start by saying that it's really too close to call this election, and that every scenario is possible, a blue wave, a red wave, a divided Congress with parties, so we should all keep that in mind. And it's actually in our baseline that we could see protests and delays in the outcome, and this could test the institutions if these are prolonged. So that's, first thing to note. The second is that, I don't have to tell you that the candidates offer really stark country visions, right? They're very different country visions. But we have identified 3 commonalities that, regardless of who wins, we expect they will pursue, policies, objectives that they'll pursue that will impact Latin America. The first is that none of the candidates are really proposing a meaningful way to reduce the fiscal deficit. We have at Moody's a negative outlook, actually, to the US rating, so that's something to keep in mind. The second commonality we identified is that either candidate will curb immigration, unauthorized migration in particular. So we see stricter border security, limited asylum requests, and this will impact Mexico and Central America because we see either candidate urging the governments in Mexico and Central America to stop immigrants crossing to the border, and that's going to create tensions with the region and with the US. And the third commonality that we see is China. Rising tensions between the US and China's presence in Latin America in sectors that the US considers strategic, like manufacturing and renewable energy, will create tensions with countries in the region. Now, one thing to note is that the US continues to be the largest FDI investor in the region, but China is already South America's top trading partner. And as China continues to invest in these sectors, it can create some tensions, as I mentioned. China's presence in Mexico is still limited, but we've seen more Chinese imports in Mexico. And as the USMCA negotiation approach, we will start seeing negotiation tables as soon as next year. That would also be a key topic of consideration, again, regardless of who wins. So, what big differences do we see, Michael, overall between the 2 candidates? Because those were the commonalities. I would say that with Trump, we've seen threats of blanket tariffs. And if those are enacted, that will be detrimental to trade flows, to global trade flows, to global growth. And that would then, in turn, negatively affect Latin American exports if those were to be implemented. And this is a large contrast with Harris, which we think will continue the Biden administration's approach of more staggered and targeted tariffs, because those have continued during this administration. The other is mass deportations, which is another Trump proposal. There's a lot of logistical and diplomatic and practical hurdles for that to be implemented, but it's not, unfeasible. And so if that was to happen, the countries in Latin America that will be most impacted are the ones that depend on remittances that are key sources of income and consumption. And those, Central America, Jamaica, actually 16% of their GDP remittances represent that. With Harris, we see a little bit more of an opportunity for partnerships and looking at the region, kind of like, as I said, partners in a holistic way versus more bilateral relations that we see with a Trump presidency, and less of a focus of domestic and industrial policy and reshoring, which will be a focus for either candidate, but perhaps a little bit more with Trump. And so I'll just finish with something of an opportunity with this China and US tensions, which is green energy and the transformation. We all know that Latin America is rich in minerals that are key for the green transition, and that will be a very good opportunity for the US to counter China's presence, if that's what it wants, by investing in Latin America in those sectors.
Great. Thank you very much, Ariane, for that. And I think if we're turning back now to our sort of key topic about unleashing the potential. Paula, I mean, you touched on some of the things in your remarks that need to happen: better security and safety, better public services, better education. What role can business leaders play in trying to make some of these things happen?
Yeah, we have a role in every single one of those agendas, no? So in training and development, that's a massive, massive agenda. We receive millions of curriculums and millions of, we post millions of jobs every single year. and people do not come with the skills that we need them. So it's about...
What's missing? What are the things missing?
So sometimes there's discipline, structure, you know, come at the time that we need you, etc. No? Coming at the time that we need you is absolutely fundamental. We need to run machinery, we need to drive trucks, etc. No? So there's an informality about understanding time schedules that is quite appalling. I mean, it's really, really surprising, you know? Teamwork, that you get through education, maybe sports, but mainly education. It's about teamwork. You need the engineers, the operators, the quality people, you know, the raw material people, all working as a team. It comes through education. So that one is a fundamental axis, I would say, of Latin America. We in Latin America need to influence, by the way, government, saying, hey, we need an education that serves the purpose of creating very powerful adults for the next 20 years, no?
And do you see positive examples? Are the countries getting it right? I mean, where would you go in the region?
Yeah, there are examples. Of course, there's always great examples everywhere. But what we worry about is the basis of our society, no? The people that have more vulnerabilities and are farther away in the outskirts of the cities, the people we don't see. Sometimes they're absolutely invisible, unfortunately, no? So education is one part, infrastructure is the other. Today, it's Wi-Fi. I mean, you can live in the middle of a jungle in Latin America, and you need Wi-Fi. And by the way, they're all early adopters, correct? They all know how it works intuitively, and it's massive. We are receiving purchase orders from the little lady on top of El Cerro de la Punta de no sé qué selva, and she's buying on an app that we installed in her phone, no? And she has absolutely no problem in doing this, no? So there's early adoption of technology, which is a huge unleash of economic power, in my opinion. And we need more of that, no? Education, infrastructure, and opportunities, more and more investments in the right way. No? When any of these companies come to any town in Latin America, boom, you create better jobs instantaneously. Yep. And there needs to be un Estado de Derecho, no? State of law, so that we feel comfortable in coming and doing that type of big investments, etc. And then leave it to us, no? Leave it to us, because we will change agro. Agro, for example, is an agenda I really like, because it's a contact sport. It's like boxing, no? There's a whole bunch of old tapes in agro. Now, science has evolved so much in terms of the use of water, soil, management of fertilizers, pesticides. We need to be in a new agenda. For that, you need the most powerful companies that are worried about sustainability like no other, to really do that change management on the ground, no? Right. So it's around public and private partnerships to a certain extent, to say, hey, we need to work mutually on advancing the agendas that will protect our citizens in the next 25 years in Latin America.
Thank you. And Cristina, I mean, you're at the heart of the tech industry. You talked about some of the excitement generated in tech in the region. And we were talking about 5G earlier too. And this takes us also into the whole question about US-China rivalry, right? And we know the United States has been pressing hard some of the countries in the region not to let China use 5G, supply 5G for their networks, saying it's a big security threat. I mean, what's your view on this, looking at the region and from where you stand? I mean, is this a genuine concern? Is this something we shouldn't really bother about? Is it overblown? I mean, where's it all going? What's the real story here on 5G and security?
Yeah, so for sure, we were just on the round table before, and the gentleman said that the 5G is going to be the G with the shorter lifetime, because the 6G is already at the corner. Okay. The infrastructure is very important for us to really materialize everything that is happening in terms of technology, infrastructure. So without that, to really take and unleash the potential of our region is impossible. But we really went a big way through. So Paula mentioned about agribusiness is super important across the region. And many, many years ago, when we talked to anyone, the big topic was, I cannot bring the technology because the infrastructure is not there, I cannot access, I need to have real-time information, I need to have security on the data. But now I think we are seeing this coming in a different level, with different technologies, with the satellites and everything that is coming. So the infrastructure, I think, is the basics that is still not 100% deployed, but when you see on the universe of time, we see that the evolution is there, and I think that's the minimum to really materialize. Then what you build on top of that is the important part. So the infrastructure, for sure, we're receiving a lot of in the region. You mentioned about the geopolitical topic. We are receiving as a region a lot of investments from China. So that's created the tension that you also touched base before. So I think this is a topic to see as a reality. And we really need to guarantee that for our countries, so we have the investment, but for our countries, we take the best of the outcome that comes from this infrastructure. I think that's probably the opportunity that we should address as leaders here. So what do we do with technology? What do we do with this investment on the infrastructure? Because then you can build a very resilient business. Yeah, we can see agribusiness in the region is amazing. How much innovation it is on the day-to-day. How much sustainability we see across the board. I have the chance of visiting many customers across the region, and what they do and how they use sustainability, technology, innovation, connectivity, all the IoT is all time already available. Usually we think about the big transformation, but I have customers in the middle of nowhere, really looking on the interface of all the devices, bringing this information, not just for their business, but also how they take decisions. And maybe just one anecdote on that one. I was visiting one of our customers very close to our labs there, close to São Leopoldo in the south of Brazil, for the ones that are familiar with the region. Very impacted now with the flooding on the last couple of months, but very rich in terms of technology and use. And I was talking to this owner, and he was very, let's say, empowered, but also starting the business by himself. And when we start talking about technology, innovation, and IoTs, and all these devices and information systems in an iPad, and said, you know, Chris, what's good? Because with this technology, I can bring my next generation to be part of the solution. Usually, if they start the business, then the sons, the daughters, they move outside. They don't want to be on the agribusiness. But with technology, you also have an inclusion of the whole family, because now they see the potential of technology, innovation, and information. So there's also an aspect on the social part. And to Paula's point before, we need to guarantee that we have the technology spread, because especially on a more vulnerable society that we have, they are not, usually they are on the big cities, but they are far away in the countries outside the big cities. So if you give capabilities, infrastructure, and access, you can also have the inclusion reflected that is so important and impactful for our region. So I think we are on a good path. There's still a lot of things to happen, but for sure is the basis to really be what we can unleash for Latin America across the many years.
And should we be worried about Huawei 5G, or is this a non-issue for your clients? I mean, is there a real security issue here or not?
Oh, for sure. In terms of data and how you protect that, for sure, you need to be very careful, because at the end, the data is the valuable part. Okay. So guaranteeing that you have the data, first, use it on the right way. So as I mentioned before, on the ethical part, on how we assess is important. Who will access that? So all the security topics, and also acknowledge that this is a risk. If somebody will steal, that's why the investments on the cybersecurity and cybercrime is so big. So I think the way we use, the way we protect is fundamental, But the infrastructure needs to be there. You cannot avoid having the data, having the systems because of the insecurity, but for sure how we use and how we structure the data is fundamental. Maybe one of the big priorities for companies, for boards, is all the topic in terms of security, how to use, and who can access and protect your systems is probably fundamental for any business at this time.
Thank you. Ariane, I wanted to come to a sort of country perspective here, and the two biggest economies in the region. Something of a paradox this year. Mexico is supposed to be in the middle of a nearshoring boom, next to the US, part of USMCA, growing about 1%. Brazil, outside free trade agreements, growing 3%. How do you contrast the risks and opportunities for business in these two markets at the moment?
Sure. I'm going to answer that question, but I'm going to add something very quick to the answers of Paula, Cristina right now, because they mentioned infrastructure, education, technology. I would add security, which is huge in the region. And you also asked, what countries are doing it right, and this is going to be related to my answer of Mexico and Brazil. And we've actually been upgrading and putting positive outlooks in countries like Costa Rica, Dominican Republic, Paraguay just became investment grade, and Brazil. And when I was looking at our actions, I saw that the commonalities was implementation of reforms across different administrations, continuity, resilience, building resilience, stronger institutions. And the reality is that our countries' governments do not have the resources, and they've actually accumulated more debt now, and with interest rates rising, they're going to be very tight fiscally. So they need to create the operating environment that welcomes private investment precisely to invest in the infrastructure that we're discussing in the logistics, and the impact, mitigating the impact of climate change. We mentioned droughts, water scarcity. Those are huge challenges for the region to overcome. So, briefly answering your question of Mexico and in Brazil, you're right. In Brazil, I was mentioning that we just upgraded to BA1 and kept a positive outlook. It has to do with this improving of the operating environment and of reforms. I don't know what happened with the volume. Can you hear me?
Just shout.
There's still a lot to do in the fiscal part in the case of Brazil, but there's a lot of improvement in the growth prospects in agriculture, in oil, and these reforms that I said, some of them began with the Temer administration and kept going, and have been good guardrails against some of the political noise that we're seeing. So that's creating some favorable operating environment. And comparing and contrast, let's not forget that Brazil has continental proportions. It could be a continent. And so the strength of its domestic economy creates some resilience against negative global trends, given that it's also relatively a closed economy. Now, contrasting that to Mexico, it's true, the nearshoring potential hasn't really materialized. Mexico needs to address a lot of the bottlenecks that I mentioned: water scarcity, security, infrastructure. In Mexico, energy transmission is key, and more offering. And this actually offers a huge opportunity for people like you, because consumption has been quite resilient, and yes, we expect growth to decline, but it increase in real wages, increase in some of the government transfers have really strengthen the consumer and the domestic demand. And there's so much need of basic infrastructure in Mexico that even if the operating environment might not be the best, with the recent judicial overhaul, for example, there's a lot of opportunities in infrastructure in Mexico in the energy sector.
Okay, thank you. Roberto, you were talking earlier about resilience and about how Latin America bounced back fast, air travel recovered more quickly than anyone expected. Is there something there, a bit of a lesson for some of the business leaders in this room about resilience in the region's capacity to bounce back? Something that you see in the experiences LATAM has had, where it went through a difficult restructuring process, but seems to be coming back stronger. Are there some lessons you can draw out of that you could share with the audience here?
Yes, well, as you know, we had to file for Chapter 11 under the middle of the pandemic because we didn't have, unlike in the US and Europe, help from governments to survive. And those were existential times. Not many times in your professional career are faced, or maybe never, with the question is, are we going to get out of this? But that is actually a good moment, because it allows you to ask a question, which is, if we get out of this, why? Why should we exist? Why does it matter? What should LATAM, in our case, be in 10 years, in 20 years, is it worth to do the effort? And I think that the learning we got from that very dark moment was that we had the opportunity to really think about what is it important for our people and for the communities where we operate. Today, LATAM, my job is to make it more humane. And we're a service, and by the way, we are due to our customers and to people that are around us. And I don't think that you can develop today a business, whether it's an airline or whatever, if you don't think that, first of all, organizations are social entities. And if people at the end of the day don't feel that there is not only a professional interest in working with you, but a personal connection, it doesn't make sense for you, it doesn't make sense for them, and it doesn't make sense for business. So I guess probably one of the biggest reflections from these complicated moments was that results must be the outcome of things that we have to do right. It's not the other way around. So today I think a lot about my people, my customers, my environment, and then my numbers as a consequence of these things. So I honestly think that us corporations or large organizations are not necessarily as humane as we have to be. And my reflection is that when you get people emotionally attached to what you do, well, they do things that they wouldn't do otherwise. I mean, there's no money actually that can pay for emotional connection. So I wonder to what extent are leaders today, which talk about things that they believe they're important, but not necessarily mean much to the people. And you can see the disconnect today. I personally, for example, didn't vote in this election last Sunday. And I didn't want to because I just didn't feel that I had any kind of connection. And it's bad, because it's not really good. So we need, I think, as leaders to get involved more. We just simply can't say, all right, politics and development of economies are for some kind of people. I think that we have a responsibility to be more involved, help more, raise our voices a little bit more, make sure that all the potential that we have to do good is not simply looked inwards, as it happens in most of our companies. I don't think that leaders in the future will be good leaders and thrive, and their organizations thrive, if we don't understand that probably our job is a little bit bigger than simply running our operations.
So there's a very interesting thought. Leaders ought to get more involved. Paula, Cristina, any
Maybe,
comments?
Roberto, what
Yeah.
you're saying is leaders should become more female, perhaps? Like,
Yeah.
that sounded like that. No, I agree 100%. He's spot on. And again, it's back to what our employee base, our communities, they deserve to be seen. I don't know how to say this. No, they deserve to be really seen and be focal to anything we do. And that's what we're trying to do, actually.
Yeah, maybe I'll just on your point, maybe nobody needs to be more female, but I really like the concept of Harsh Sisodia, is the guy that wrote about conscious capitalism, so that you can have profit and live the purpose, so you have both. And one book that I like is called Shakti Leadership, that talks about competence, male and female competence. It's not about men and women, because you need to handle both competences. In the previous times, you need to be only the male competences. You need to be assertive, you need to be very direct, you need to be powerful. But I think more and more, probably especially on the pandemic, we learned that we need to also have the female competences. Empathy, taking care, looking for this connection that Roberto just mentioned. So the best is when you can combine both and use on the right time, because sometimes you need to be more assertive. So I think that's probably what I hear from that. And maybe what we learn also in the experience and after 40 years working is that you need to balance also all the topics on mental health and bring these conversations into the work environment, which was completely out of this discussion before. So if you want to really make your business grow and take the best of your people, you also need to embrace those conversations that are more human. So I'm with Roberto and Paula that we need to embrace that on our day-to-day as leaders.
Do you want to add something there, Ariane?
Yes, I would add that we actually at Moody's did a study on female participation in boards, and we found a correlation between higher rated companies and more presence of female in their board directors. And this is also correlated to better corporate governance practices, more transparency. And we think that it's because companies that have more presence of female in their boards tend to also welcome more diverse perspectives of backgrounds, which is really what you're touching on. Regardless of female, men, different perspectives can lead to better business outcomes. And in Latin America, this is difficult because labor participation, female labor participation is relatively low. It's around 50%. So we see more women in boards that are in the sectors where there's more women participating, which is usually the service sector, not so much, for example, in manufacturing and others. So it's a challenge.
And I'm delighted that we have 3 women on the panel today. I only wish, though, that was representative of what was happening in Latin America more generally, but sadly it isn't. I mean, the reality is that there are very few female CEOs in Latin America, not many female board members. Why is it taking so long for the region to change there? I mean, even on the political front, we've had plenty of Latin American female presidents. It seems to be taking much longer to have female CEOs. What's going on? What has to change? Who'd like to jump in on that?
I'll jump on that one. So, number one, at least we in PepsiCo think math matters, And we do have special targets for every level of leadership to reach in a certain amount of years. So you see the distortions between genders when you look at the math. And then you have to ask yourself the right questions. Why is this happening in supply chain or in sales, etc.? Then we put in special plans to change the math over time, right? And it starts with attracting female talent. Female talent in Latin America is superb. Like, I'm really saying superb. They come with all the, the right attitudes plus very, very good training. Then it's about retaining that talent and then developing that talent. So we have specific plans in attraction. For example, one program
But it won't happen without specific plans.
Yeah, but
we can't expect this to happen spontaneously by itself.
No, you have to have the math, the visibility of where you're standing exactly in every area of the company. Then you put the right plan to make that number improve, right? One program I like in attraction is ready to return. So many women in Latin America, they feel they need to leave the workforce to be able to take care of their families, right? And then 5 years later, they're really wanting to come back. Okay, bring them back. They're the best, absolutely. You can copy, we won't tell you the recipe of Doritos or Pepsi, but if you want the recipe for ready to return.
God forbid.
Yeah, go for it, copy it. Because ready to return is, a program, it's pretty easy to understand. It's really, really solid and showing great results. So.
Okay, do you want to add anything, Cristina?
Yeah, I think you need to have the intention, right, to change, right, in your organization. So you start putting targets and evaluating, so you need to really have the analytics. What you see, at least we see in SAP, that the entry level, 50% and sometimes even more are already being female entering, but we need to guarantee that we really follow and develop as they progress. So we have metrics, specific metrics to address women in management. So worldwide it should be 50-50 by 2030. We in the region in Latin America, we are pretty ahead, so we are already at 38. Globally is 35% women in management. And we are monitoring, and you need to have positions that really focus on that, but also promoting, guarantee what are the blockers that you need to overcome as an organization. And also look this not just for a company, but also on the ecosystem. So I have the privilege to talk to many customers, partners. How do we take this conversation, not just for one area or one company, but how this really brings impact to our business. You have the analytics, so you can show, we see this on day-to-day, when you have a more diverse, different perspective teams, it works on a different way. You really see outcomes, and especially on technology, I was talking before about bias, it's fundamental that we have a good representation of men, women in our region, especially in Brazil, all the racial discussions, people that came from different areas and field of knowledge. If you have all of this all together, the outcome is much better, and you create products that go to that part of the society, which is business. So it's not just because, of course, we have a social responsibility. I'm super passionate about that, so I think we have a lot of things to do on this inclusion. But it's also a business conversation. If you don't develop a product or you don't address that part of the society, you are missing a big part of that, of that addressable market. But I think as leaders, we also need to think on the ESG part. Usually you talk about the environmental, which is super important, climate change, we know what's happening. The governance is probably part of the DNA of all the companies. But we in the region have probably the big challenge on the social part, right? To really bring inclusion with capabilities, education. And this is a big transformation and probably unleash most of the most potential that we have because our talents are incredible. We have a lab in the south and goes, I don't know, even head to head to the other global parts, probably I think go beyond because they bring those capabilities you mentioned in the beginning, the creativity, the willingness to support, to transform. I think this power that we have, sometimes we don't take this very as probably like a talent, but we should be proud of that.
Let me stop you there, thank you, because we're running out of time rapidly. But before we end, I just wanted to ask each of you, briefly, in a minute if you could, if you can pick one thing you think Latin America could do to really unleash its potential on the global stage, what would it be? If you could choose one thing that's really going to make a difference to project the region globally, get its potential there. Roberto, do you want to start?
For me, it's simple. We have to get into the world of top technology. This is what's going to make societies and companies thrive in the future. We have, as I said, 650 million people. We have the human capital. Not necessarily we have it trained the way we need it, but I think this is the future. And we need to jump into the train. We just can't simply see that and be, as we have been in the past, buyers of technology and not trying to be, at the same time, developing it. And software has the ability, I mean, we don't need to invest necessarily billions of dollars in infrastructure to compete. So it's a human capital that can allow us to put ourselves in a good spot in the world going forward.
Thank you. Ariane.
Well, you know, in Moody's, we don't do policy recommendations, so it's hard for me to think in those terms. But we do see that in Latin America, one common thread is the large income inequality. And that really creates problems for the policymaking because what you do for a sector is completely not applicable to the rest. So it complicates really the decision-making of every level. So I will say that and improving the operating environment for private sector investment, given the challenges that the governments face to actually catalyze that potential.
Thank you. Cristina.
Yeah, for me, the basis always is education, how we prepare our talents, our society to really be head-to-head with the other big nations, but probably is the power to transform because you can really bring and give access for them to grow and thrive in their personal lives. So for me, education is something that probably would help us to unleash big potential in the region.
Thank you, Paula.
I would focus on food security. We all need to eat and drink, right? And Latin America is millionaire in the biodiversity, in land, and also in water, maybe sometimes in the wrong places, but we do have water. So being an industry based on agro for Latin America is a huge unleash of prosperity.
Thank you. So we've had human capital, technology, education, policy, government pro-business, and food security. But I think a very rich, wide-ranging discussion. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. And many, many thanks to our 4 panelists for all their insights and experience.
Thank you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, we now present to you our next Bravo Dialogues, Key Imperatives for the Region's Clean Energy Transition. Please welcome to the stage the moderator of our next panel, Carlos Barrera, CEO of Atlas Renewable Energy, and panel members Juan Ignacio Ribriolo, Executive Vice President and President of the International Business Unit and Infrastructure at the AES Corporation, Jairo Loenzato, CEO for Latin America and Smurfit Westrock. Shannon Kellogg, VP of Public Policy for the Americas and Amazon Web Services. And Elizabeth Roberex, Division Chief